Well, good morning, everyone, and happy Mardi Gras weekend. So I am your worship associate for this morning, Pastor Stacy, and it is a joy to be with all of you this morning, in person and virtually at home. So who are we as a community church? We are a progressive, open-minded, and inclusive religious community. We welcome all who are on a spiritual search for truth and meaning. Ours is a faith in action as we do the work of social justice and elevate compassion in our quest to live ethically, recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every being. I encourage you to look to your weekly email for many announcements. I'm just going to add a few myself right now. The Social Justice Ministry Committee and myself are going to be engaging in some social justice engagements in our city. The first one is a dinner at Dookie Chase, Saturday at 5:30. Please let me know if you're interested. And also, those of you who are asking more about Article 2 updates, I have a Zoom meeting on February 28th at 7 p.m. And First Unitarian and North Shore will be joining us in that class. And our lay-led sermon writing class begins March 18th, and let me know, or the weekend of. So let me know if you're interested in that. We also have two other announcements by two folks here in our congregation. First, I'll invite Walter LeBon, who's going to be talking about Melbas. And Melbas is one of the nonprofits our endowment committee gives to. And thank you, Walter, for talking to us about that.
Good morning. I'd like to tell you about one of the best kept secrets in New Orleans. On Elysian Fields, 15 blocks from the river, is a po' boy shop called Melba's. When you enter a po' boy shop, you might expect to see a counter, people lining up for po' boys, maybe a rack of potato chips. Melba's has these things, but what catches your eye across the ceiling are strings of book covers. Book covers because this po' boy shop is home to Melba's literacy program. New Orleans' 9th Ward is not known as a literary mecca. In fact, Melba's is promoting reading in a neighborhood which is a book desert. Melba's literacy program was started 5 years ago by Jane Wolfe, who with her husband Scott owns Melba's. Scott and Jane met as teenagers, passed GED exams to get their high school diplomas, then went into business, operating Wagner's Meats. You may have heard their slogan, "You can't beat Wagner's Meat." After Katrina, Jane and Scott opened Melba's po' boy shop. In 2017, Melba's started sponsoring book signings and giving a free signed book to anyone who bought a lunch. To date, they have given away over 18,000 books. Some of the authors who've taken part are Mark Morial, former mayor of New Orleans, Sister Helen Pleasant, famous opponent of the death penalty and author of Dead Man Walking, and Walter Isaacson, author of The Code Breaker and the biography of Benjamin Franklin. Jane Wolfe has a very interesting story. Years after starting her business career, she attended Tulane University. After graduating from Tulane, Jane was admitted to Harvard Divinity School. I'm sure she's the only graduate of Harvard Divinity School I've ever met. At Harvard, Jane met Stephen Prothero, author of God, the bestseller. Stephen will be signing and giving away books at Melba's on March 24th from noon until 1. CCUU's Endowment Committee gives awards to groups which strive to better the community. I think it's most appropriate that our CCUU Endowment Committee has approved a $1,000 award to Melba's literacy program. In closing, I'd like to quote Jane Wolfe. "We are not business people, we're teachers. Every transaction is an opportunity to serve our customers and community." Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. And we also have Laura, our board chair, who's going to talk about a special meeting that's coming up about a very special person.
Good morning, everybody. I am calling a special congregational meeting to take place 2 weeks from today, immediately following the service. According to our bylaws, we need 12 days' notice to call a special congregational meeting, so we're certainly within the limits for following that bylaw. The purpose is to vote on naming the sanctuary after Avis Ogilvy Moore. Now, the reason that we want to do that is because some of you don't know, some of you are new and just don't know how much she has done for this church over the years. I've gotten some various uncertain bits of information as far as the specific financial, monetary amounts that she has given. But here is what I've been told. After Katrina, when the building that we had at that time was completely destroyed, and we had to rebuild and build this beautiful green sanctuary, she gave possibly as much as 50% of what needed to go into the building. At a minimum, she gave $100,000. I've heard figures anywhere from 100 to 300, so I don't know exactly, but whatever it was huge. We wouldn't be here if it were not for Avis. Additionally, she has been a very strong pledging member for longer than I've been here at this church. I don't even know how long. But some of you might recall last fall when we did the pledge drive, all of a sudden, we were iffy. It was iffy. And then all of a sudden, shot way up, $40,000. That was Avis. That is a regular amount that she has contributed every year for a long, long time. So I am hoping there won't be any objection to our call to name the sanctuary after her. We had a board meeting this past Tuesday, and the board voted unanimously to recommend that the congregation vote to do this. I'll also say there's nothing in the bylaws about something of this magnitude, but my feeling as president was I didn't just want the board to vote on it. I didn't want to just decide myself to do it. That didn't seem right. I really do want a congregational vote. So, again, 2 weeks from today, immediately following the service, and it shouldn't last longer than 3 to 5 minutes to get it done. Another thing about this, just a little bit of history. When she made the donation right after Katrina, Reverend Jim Vanderweel was our minister. And there was discussion between him and her at that time to name the sanctuary after her. But Avis was pretty modest. Very, very generous, but also modest. And she really didn't want people knowing the huge amounts that she had been giving to the church, but she was fine with people knowing it once she was no longer living. And so that's why we're feeling free to let you all know this at this stage of the game. I've got notes here. I just want to make sure I'm saying everything that I want to say about this. think that's pretty much it, although I do want to say she lived to be 97, and she was sharp until the very end. I was exchanging emails with her as recently as a few weeks ago, and you know, there was no indication that she was not going to be with us much longer. But of course, that's turned out to be what happened. Tentatively, strike the tentatively. It was tentatively, but then I was just informed this morning. The memorial service for her is scheduled for March 11th at 2 o'clock, with Reverend Jim Vanderweel being the main minister for that service, because he was the main minister for the duration of her most recent attendance at the church. We want to get this done before the memorial service so that we can announce it at the service, the renaming, while people from her family and community in Maryland will be here for that. And obviously we won't be able to, we'll probably not be able to have a wonderful set of plaques above the doors until later on, because we want to do it right. But, and obviously we can't move ahead until we do get the congregational vote. So that'll be 2 weeks from today. Okay, I believe that is everything, except let me just also add that if anybody has any questions or concerns about this, please let me know. So hopefully we can get her done next Sunday, 2 weeks from today. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. So it is my pleasure to introduce the minister that is offering our service today, Reverend Nathan Ryan. Reverend Nathan Ryan comes from the Baton Rouge congregation, where he has served for 11 years, currently serving as their senior minister. Reverend Nathan is from southern Louisiana and attending the North Shore congregation for much of his childhood. So a long life Unitarian Universalist. And just welcome Nathan, Reverend Nathan, and look forward to his sermon today, and he'll present us with our opening words. Well, what we'll do is we're going to light the chalice. Land acknowledgement. Before we do that, I'm sorry, I did not do our land acknowledgement, which I would like to do. We acknowledge and pay tribute to the original inhabitants of this land. The city of New Orleans is a continuation of an indigenous trade hub of the Mississippi River, known for thousands of years as Bulbangsha. Tribes have lived on this land, include the Caddo, the Natchez, the Choctaw, the Chitimacha, the Huma, the Tunica, the Biloxi, the Atacapa, Ishak, among others. We recognize that as a result of broken treaties and involuntary removals, Native Americans were often forced from their lands. We remember and pay respect to the communities impacted by these actions. Native peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial, and the resilient voices of Native Americans remain an inseparable part of our culture. With gratitude and honor, we acknowledge the indigenous nations that have lived and continue to thrive here. And now for our opening words.
So I found these by a journalist from 1846. There's some language in here that is both offensive and outdated. I decided to leave it in because of the larger content that it provided. He was a traveler, like he journalism, and he sort of traveled the country and wrote about his travels. What do you call it? Traveling journalist. a journalist on travel. Anyway. February 23rd, 1846. We arrived here in New Orleans on the day before the carnival. From the time we landed in New England to this hour, we seem to have been in a country where all, whether rich or poor, were laboring from morning till night without ever indulging in a holiday. I had sometimes thought the nation's motto should be all work and no play. It was quite a novelty and a refreshing sight to see a whole population giving up their minds for a short season of amusement. There was a grand procession parading the streets, almost everyone dressed in the most grotesque attire. Troops of them on horseback, some in open carriage, with bands of music and in a variety of costumes, some as Indians with feathers in their heads, and one, a jolly fat man, as Mardi Gras himself. All wore masks, and here and there in the crowd, or stationed on a balcony above, we saw persons armed with bags of flour. Did y'all know about this? Which they showered down copiously on anyone who seemed particularly proud of their attire. The strangeness of the scene was not a little heightened by the blending of Negroes, quadroons, and mulattoes to the crowd. And we were amused by observing the ludicrous surprise, mixed with contempt, of several unmasked, stiff, grave Anglo-Americans from the North, who were witnessing for the first time what seemed to them so much mummery and tomfoolery. Didn't know you were going to hear those words in church. The crowd seemed determined to allow nothing to disturb their good humor. But although many of the wealthy Protestant citizens take part in the ceremony, this rude intrusion struck me as a kind of foreshadowing of coming events, emblematic of the violent shock which the invasion of the Anglo-Americans is about to give to the old regime of Louisiana.
And now we will light our chalice and music from Bert Brunson. This is our time for joys and sorrows, and it's a sacred time for us. If you're online, please write your joy and or sorrow in the comments. And if you have something written on paper, you can share that, or you can come up after our hymn that Nicholas and the choir will be joining or leading us in, hymn number 108, My Life Flows On in Endless Song. right, so let me, these joys and sorrows. Oh, okay. All right. So I'll start with a sorrow. And we also have a joy about the same person. Laura Miller says, I heard that Jimmy Carter has entered hospice. One of the few presidents I was privileged to meet. And a joy for the life and work of Jimmy Carter, one of the best ex-presidents in this country's history. So we will light a candle for Jimmy Carter and all the amazing work he's done for humanity. Any other joy and sorrows to share? Oh, yeah, thank you, Cynthia. So, in addition to a candle for the wonderful and amazing, beautiful spirited Jimmy Carter, a joy and a sorrow, we can light a candle for the joy of Mardi Gras season. Any other joys and sorrows? So we will light 2 more candles. One for the joys still bubbling up, too new to share. And one for the sorrows we cannot yet put words to. Know that we love you and you are in our hearts.
So let me start with some logistics real quick. Would you be good with us cutting Nearer My God to Thee?
Sure.
Good. And could we cut the Molly House Gordon reading? Great. All right. Just so we can I have a lot of dumb stuff I want to get you through. So I want to make sure we have time for it. Good stuff too, but since we're entering into the Mardi Gras weekend, I wanted to share something that I struggle with every year for Mardi Gras. As you heard, I was born in New Orleans. We didn't hear all this, but I was born in New Orleans, raised in Slidell. I was raised Unitarian Universalist. I spent my whole life here except for a 10-year hiatus abroad in Texas and D.C. So the thing that I struggle with, and this may actually, I gave you my credentials because you're about to take them away. I really struggle with the lyrics to When the Saints Go Marching In. So you all know the first verse, right? When the saints go marching in, when it be in the number, when the saints go marching in. Gets a little more treacherous the further you dig, though. One of the verses could be when the drums begin to bang. Not too bad, it's kind of musical. We're good, right? When the stars fall from the sky. Trumpet sounds its call, all right? I think we can still pretend this is about music. The moon turns red with blood. There's a lot more of that apocalyptic energy around songs we sing at Mardi Gras time, and I don't know how to handle it. And that is as a devout Unitarian Universalist who is used to squinting and making awkward theological translations. And it's not surprising, considering I was raised in this faith, to expect that I would be uncomfortable with some of these more challenging theological concepts. And we must remember that many apocalyptic or Armageddon hymns that are intertwined with Mardi Gras, they come out of enslavement. And these songs were an act of defiance to say that even if an enslaver can torture, even if an oppressive government can suck all of the hope out of the lived world, that this joy, this hope, is not of this world, and oppressors have no power over them. There is a promise that even extreme suffering in this world cannot have the power over the inherent goodness and greatness that comes within each soul. In some ways, we are very far away from that reality, and in some ways, it is still inseparably immersed within us. But as someone whose histories and identities have shielded me from a lot of these realities, it takes some extra exploration for me to understand. And so I thought today it would be worth us exploring. We're going to have some fun with this service with a little bit of a serious undertone. And so today I was thinking maybe we could play with the question. If there was an apocalypse, would we celebrate Mardi Gras immediately following? Let's poll the congregation. I hear some yes, yes? All right, okay. Let's go. No, I'm kidding, I'm kidding. I had a whole bunch more written, but if you're already good, we're good. So let's start this off. Let's actually just name an apocalypse that's going to happen, not predictively. Like, for the scenario, what's an apocalypse you would like? For me, what?
A hurricane.
What? No, not what you would like. Name an apocalypse we can predict, we can project onto this scenario. Asteroid, great. What else? No, we're not doing hurricane and flood. What else? What else? No, we're not doing global warming. Asteroids filled with zombies. Good? Good, we'll do that. We're in fascist zombies. Great, great. All right. So I've been doing a thing where I've been experimenting with taking the sermon and spreading it apart because I tend to get kind of lost in my sermons. So I'm going to ask you to go on this journey with me. So I'm going to spread this into 4 sections. Section 2 will be us going and looking at apocalypse. But I'd like for you to think of this service as a survival guide, like our last chance to get together as Unitarian Universalists before things get really weird out there for the next 3 days. Mardi Gras is a magic time of the year where we celebrate the joy of being alive, knowing that death will come, or Lent will come. It's not just the costumes, it's not just the parades, it's something larger. So as we go into these next few days, let's start with a little apocalyptic music. Invite you to rise, body or spirit. Let's go ahead and, how many verses do you want to do?
We got 6.
Well, we're doing all 6?
We got saints.
We're going to do saints.
Moon turns red with blood.
Moon turns red with blood.
Revolution comes.
Revolution comes.
The rich go out and work.
And then the rich go out and work. Are y'all good?
And
Saints.
then we all have food to eat.
Well, we can't do all of them. So,
Okay.
all right,
Okay.
saints.
Then saints. Blood. Revolution. Rich work.
All right. When the saints go marching in, moon turns red with blood. The rich go back to the revolution. Revolution will come, and when the rich go out and play, go out and work. Come on, let's sing. My goal is to get you happy and uncomfortable. Was everyone comfortable with the bloody moon part? I tried this at the Baton Rouge church, and they didn't buy into the bloody moon. So, I guess we're close to Mardi Gras. So the next thing we have to do is define what we mean by apocalypse. The fascist zombie asteroid situation, right? This is no small feat, I know, but for us to be able to do the full examination, we have to know it. The academic term, so you have to know, we paid a lot of money to go to school. And our job is a very ambiguous job. And so academics invented very expensive words to justify the money that we paid. And one of those words is eschatology. Y'all know eschatology? Right? Yeah. You paid a lot of money for that word. Yeah. Eschatology. The question of eschatology is the question of end times and a question about the trajectory of the world. Every religion has an eschatological interpretation. Doesn't matter the faith, doesn't matter how conservative or liberal someone is in that faith. This is an element of every religion. And I'm sure you're familiar with the only the saved go to heaven and everyone else, gets thrown into hell kind of stuff. I don't believe that's the predominant eschatology in our country. I believe it's the loudest. All right, so are we good on eschatology? For the longest time, ours, both Unitarians and Universalists, have had this idea of onward and upward. It's the idea that every generation makes the world better, safer, less racist, closer to the kingdom of heaven. Think of that old, the old Theodore Parker quote that King and Obama both use, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. That's for a long time been our eschatology. But I think that Unitarian Universalists are in a period of eschatological examination. You have to know that most Unitarian Universalism, and by no means all ever do I mean that, but it comes out of white New England. And so much of our theological understandings are informed by the white New England worldview. This is not good or bad, it's just a thing that exists. For a long time, mostly white Unitarian Universalists were happy living out this eschatology of onward and upward. Everyone will be redeemed, the saviors the world needs are right here. More recently, however, I have seen this eschatology fundamentally shaken. The pandemic has caused many of us to question some of the institutions we relied most heavily on. It exposed the fissures and cracks we didn't want to see, but it also made us question made me question my own mortality and my own safety when the literal air and communication and interaction with other human beings could be the cause of death. I think that, combined with new revelations for many, and primarily white UUs, about how deep-rooted and intransigent systems of oppression are, not just within our country, but within our own faith. Combine that with the ongoing realities of what may happen to our world with climate change. It has caused many Unitarian Universalists to reevaluate their eschatological worldview. Anyone else feeling this, or is this just me? All right, we got a few. Yeah? All right. So let me translate that. This religion has always taught, bearing in mind there is no belief requirement in this religion, but it has always taught that the world is getting better and our place is to make it better. And this comes out of much of the founding in white New England for good and for bad. People with enough privilege to avoid seeing it have started seeing the violence that has been apparent to people on the margins for as long as people have been on the margins. Combine that with traumatic hurricanes here, fires out west, blizzards up north, and people have started to wonder about whether or not this world can be saved. I do not believe that onward and upward, or the moral arc of the universe bending towards justice, is fundamentally flawed. I don't know how or if it will be redeemed. I do not think that our eschatology will completely change. Instead, in light of these new realities for many, our eschatology may become more robust, more grounded, more built in with more nuance and accountability. And maybe our answer will come from the question if we should have Mardi Gras after the apocalypse. So let's play with it now. Good luck transitioning into the offering from that.
So Community Church, Unitarian Universalist, is a self-sustaining congregation. Members' and friends' generosity help us do the sacred work of bringing justice, spirituality, and compassion to our community and beyond. So you can give online at CCUUNOLA.org or here in the church for this morning's service, here in person. Raise your hand and we can come to you with that generosity. We give 50% of our plate to a cause, our congregation, and its social justice ministry support. And for the month of February, it's staying in-house in our endowment fund and supporting great work like Melba's that was shared earlier. And thank you for that generosity.
So I started thinking about this concept. Yeah, we could turn off the projector and put the lights back on. I was thinking about this concept, and this was where we were going to do Near My God to Thee, and then I found a reading from a Unitarian Universalist minister about how we would have survived the apocalypse, and she wrote it before times, like 2019. I started thinking about this concept of Mardi Gras after the apocalypse after I went to a parade last year. I was at 625 St. Philip Street, to be precise. I know this because I went back and looked through my text. I was actually going to read you the text today because I was trying to find a friend of mine who was at that same parade. I found out we were watching the parade 1 block away from her. We exchanged a series of about 15 texts to find each other, and we never could, at least not until the parade ended. There was 2 parades sort of going next to each other. And this was my first parade after the pandemic shutdowns. It was 7 weeks after I had COVID, the disease I was afraid of for almost 2 years. I showed up with a mask on. Most of the people I was around wore masks as well, despite the fact that it was outside. When that first police car came by, I was so nervous it was indescribable. As the parade came, my worry started to melt. It happened subtly and slowly through that weird succession of poorly thought out floats, drunken brass bands, and the throws that, after I caught them once I got home, I had regretted ever grabbing. When the parade ended, we wandered down the street trying to find this friend. Like I said, another parade was coming, so we only had a few minutes to get there. We eventually found and hugged, and I realized this was the first time I had seen her since the shutdown. It was the first time I had seen her since her kid was born, and the first time she had seen me since my kid was born. And then the next parade rolled through, and we watched it. Reunited friends who hadn't seen because death and fear had kept us separate. I imagine most of the people at that parade were having some sort of similar experience because it felt like we were all survivors of an apocalypse and we were celebrating together. Last year's Mardi Gras was not, in fact, the first Mardi Gras after an apocalypse. And it helped me and other people to heal. But I'm thinking of another one that I'm sure you know, so I'm going to not push too hard. I was a director of religious education in Austin in 2006. I could not go back here for that first Mardi Gras after the storm and the flood. Who here was at the 2006 Mardi Gras? People that I talked to said that it was like a homecoming. Most of the tourists stayed away, and it was a bunch of people who thought they wouldn't see each other, seeing each other again. Because I had learned Mardi Gras was my most homesick day of the year, my first year abroad, I took the day off and I put on CBS to watch the parades, and they weren't on. So I'd figured out pretty quick that I needed to do something. So we had a party at the church, Live Oak Unitarian Universalist Church in Austin. We had about 100 people show up. We had red beans and beignets, and people danced to music. And it wasn't a celebration disconnected from that post-apocalyptic Mardi Gras. It was a Mardi Gras with celebrations that had tethers coming to Louisiana from all over the world.
I have a reading to share with you titled "Let the Good Times Roll" by Chris Rose. The should we have Mardi Gras question. It's not on the table. It's not a point of negotiation or a bargaining chip. We are going to have it, and that's that. End of discussion. We will not turn off the lights and keep the costumes in storage and ladders in the shed for another year just because we are beaten and broken and because so many of us are not here. In fact, we have to do this because we are beaten and broken and so many of us are not here. Katrina has proved more than ever that we are resilient. We are tougher than dirt. We are the soul of America. We embody the triumph of the human spirit. Hell, we are Mardi Gras. It's not up to any of those in power that we have Mardi Gras. It's up to me now, and we're having it. To encapsulate the notion of Mardi Gras is nothing more than a big drunk is to take the simple and stupid way out, and I, for one, am getting tired of staying stuck on simple and stupid. Mardi Gras is not a parade. Mardi Gras is not an alcoholic binge. Mardi Gras is returning to the same street corner year after year and standing next to the same people year after year. People whose names you may or may not even know, but you've watched their kids grow up in this public tableau, and whether they're not there, and when they're not there, you wonder, where are those guys this year? It's wearing frightful color combinations in public and rolling your eyes at the guy in your office who, like clockwork, year after year, denies that he got the baby and the king cake, and now someone else has to pony up for $10 for the next one. Mardi Gras is the love of life. It's the harmonic convergence of our food, our music, our creativity, our eccentricity, our neighbors, and our joy for living all at once.
I left that part in there about the $10 king cake. Also, not to be too controversial, this is the last part, we're going to close up. King cake is not $40 good. Like, it's like $15 good. And I will die on that hill. the Baton Rouge Church found out that I love king cake as much as I love eggnog, and it may have almost cost me my ministry. So a little piece of background on being a minister. Every Sunday we have to find readings, and there are that reflect on the theme. Most of the year is fairly easy. There's thousands of books on Armageddon and hope and prayer. You find readings that either guide you towards a conclusion or reinforce a conclusion you already knew you were going to have, and you just have to find the person who already said what you were going to say. Except for one season. This season. There is almost nothing written about this season, theologically or otherwise. Most of my ministry has been digging through some of the most useless piles of books that have ever existed to find anything remotely useful to guide my congregation through this season. I had a minister reach out to me last week and asked, she's from Lafayette and she lives in the East Coast somewhere, and she asked if I had any resources. And I sent her like everything I've ever dug up. Because it's either self-referential or the songs don't make any sense, or unless you don't know, you don't know. Do you know what I mean? So I couldn't ever find any readings to explain what was going on with this holiday. And then I figured something out. The readings about Mardi Gras are everywhere. You just have to know where to look. Any book on Louisiana, especially books about Louisiana that involve tragedy or trauma, so you may not know this. We had a professor, member of the Baton Rouge Church. She was a sociology professor who studied tragedies and trauma, and she said that unequivocally Louisiana is the most tragedied state in the country. So any book on a hurricane or a flood or racism or violence or just plain the history of any part of this region, if you flip to the last chapter of the book, the author always saves their Mardi Gras reflections for last. They do this because most authors want to find joy and hope, and the easy place to look is this season. So to translate, whatever we do these next few days might help us find hope and joy for future generations. That day, the saucer day, the zombie day, the Ragnarok and fairies day, the day the great winds came and the snows and the cities turned to crystal, the day all the plants died, plastics dissolved, the day the computers turned, the screens telling us that we would obey, the day angels drunk and muddled stumbled from the bars, and all the bells of London were sounded, the day animals spoke to us in Assyrian, the Yeti day, the fluttering capes, the arrival of the time machine day. You didn't notice any of this because you were sitting in your room, not doing anything, not even reading, not really, just looking at your telephone, wondering if I was going to call. When we were talking about reopening the church, actually almost 2 years ago now, I looked at models of what reopening could mean and could feel like. The thing that we've all been through, all of us, is profound, and it will define us for generations. And the only thing that keeps us from talking about it is it seems so absurd that we all went through it and are still going through it. Does anyone else feel like this has been a fever dream these last few years? Yes. It's nuts, right? Like that we're going to go live a life where we're scared of every other human being. It's so weird that I forget about it all the time. So when I looked at reopening, I called other UU ministers who served here in 2005. So I asked them what their experience of reopening was back then. Because things right now are not what they were before times, no matter how much we want to pretend they are. What I asked them was, how do you reopen when everyone demands that church be like it was in 2004? And it can't be. Everyone demands church be like what it was in 2019, and it can't be. Even if everyone is okay, We still have the trauma to unpack. We still have just all of the stuff, right? And in 2006, you knew things were wrong because you could see the destruction and you could see the construction at the same time. But we don't, other than masks, we don't have any real visual approximation of what we've all been through. So here's where it gets very specific for you. I counted the 20 gathered right now. Unitarian Universalism will survive this pandemic, but not all the congregations will, and not all the people will. The church in Baton Rouge has survived, and we are quite battered and bruised from it. Our attendance is not what it was. We used to be able to get 200 to 300 on a Sunday. We're lucky to get 50 at a service. We still did the 2 services, so that's about 50 to 100. Our budget isn't what it was, and we did better than most. One of the problems with this faith's tendency to clergy worship, not have worship led by clergy, but to worship us, is that we miss the impact that every member of the congregation has. Unitarian Universalism and Louisiana's Mardi Gras cultures are intertwined theologies that desperately need each other. And this faith and this church needs each other and every one of you to build back this faith in this city and this region. Not the clergy, not just the leaders. Every time any one of you is generous, every time one of you is forgiving, any time you make this specific church a laboratory for where we can practice building paradise on this earth, every time you trust your leaders and your clergy and your staff to do what they need to do to bring about beloved community, every time you take off the what do I want bib to put on the what is best for this church and this faith apron, you are helping build it back after the largest and most existential threat our faith has ever experienced. And we need you here to thrive because what we need in Unitarian Universalism this is a sentence you've never heard before, and I think it's never been uttered in the history of the world. We need you here at Community Church, Unitarian Universalists, to thrive because what we need in Unitarian Universalism is a Mardi Gras-informed eschatology. You've never heard that sentence. Never been uttered. I don't think the Beatles, when they said whatever that thing about, they were wrong and I just proved it. You're welcome. We were here a little bit over the service time, but you made history. When I think about that Neil Gaiman poem, there was a miracle and a tragedy and an apocalypse happening everywhere. Everywhere. Because remember that every year, someone has some sort of tragedy, some sort of suffering, some sort of disconnection from someone they love through death or circumstance or estrangement or disagreement or illness. Every year, someone is having a Mardi Gras after the apocalypse. I am thinking about it because last Ash Wednesday, the church I serve, we had a parent whose child killed himself, and we had a member whose father was killed on the same day. This sermon is for them. This is their Mardi Gras after the apocalypse. I don't know if this is yours. And Neil Gaiman says that we missed all of this tragedy because we were so focused on our own stuff. And we were waiting for you to call. We were wondering if there would be connection. Maybe that call is joy. Maybe that call is Mardi Gras. Maybe that call is our ancestors celebrating an integrated Mardi Gras back in 1846, waiting with bags of flour to throw on any of us who take this thing too seriously. So the spiritual practice of Mardi Gras for these next 3 days is to lay your burdens down. Let go of the things that worry you. There is plenty of time to worry about those later. Your body needs a break. You have been holding things for too long. I don't care if it's watching bad TV, eating terrible food, making art, something that doesn't fit into this all work, no play mantra that so much of this country was founded on. Every year someone suffers, and every year celebration is waiting to greet them. We've been given the gift of being alive. It's time for us to celebrate it, and to celebrate it together. Amen.
extinguish our chalice here, that it might glow gently in our hearts. May it light your path as you leave this place. May it guide your way until we are together again. And Reverend Nathan will give us our benediction.
The world needs you to celebrate these next 3 days. Go do it. Amen.